So, here we are, the first proper video within this South American history series. Now, before I get too into the history, there are a couple of things that I'd like to just briefly address. First of all, with any early history, I won't be able to give many precise details or dates regarding the earliest settlements in South America, as I'm pretty sure they cared more about not dying than writing stuff down. This means that, at least for the earliest episodes in this series, I'll be saying a lot of something happened around this area, around these two dates. Probably. Since for most of South America's early history, we're getting everything we know from the archaeological evidence we've found. Another thing that will unfortunately happen is that I will end up giving much more historical detail post the discovery of the New World by the European nations of Spain and Portugal. This is in part because many of the native South American civilizations didn't develop a writing system, and so their history was entirely passed on orally. Some civilizations had systems of writing, but many of them are now untranslatable because the Europeans who arrived weren't particularly interested in learning more about the locals. And then, as it turns out, causing the deaths of 50 to 95% of a population isn't a good way to preserve that population's culture and history, especially when that culture and history is passed down exclusively via oral tradition. The Europeans also weren't looking to learn more about South America's culture and history, so they didn't spend much time trying to preserve those things. All this to say, I will probably end up talking about South America's history more in depth after its colonization by the European powers. I will try my best to explore the fascinating history of the native South Americans, but I am just not sure how well I'll be able to do that. Anyways, with that being said, let's get into the history of South America. Well, not quite, because before talking about the history of South America, we need to talk about its geography, because that will of course play a key role in the continent's history going forwards. So first off, when I say South America, I mean this: South America, the continent whose northern border ends with Colombia's border with Panama. Many people will often confuse South America with Latin America, and those two terms will often be used interchangeably, but those two terms are not the same thing at all. Latin America refers to nations within the Western Hemisphere, whose predominant language or languages are Romance languages, such as Spanish, Portuguese, or French. And South America simply refers to the continent of South America, with its 12 countries and 1 French territory. Sorry, forgot to say spoiler alert. It is an important difference because if I were to talk about Latin American history as opposed to South American history, then I would be talking about countries such as Cuba and Mexico, which are definitely not parts of South America. Of course, I will be talking about the Latin American region from time to time, as their history is largely intertwined with that of South America, but it will not be the main focus of this series. So don't expect me to talk in depth about Mexican history here. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's examine the continent's geography. A very important part of South America's geography is its rivers, most notably the Amazon River and Amazon Basin. The Amazon River also flows through, in large part, the Amazon rainforest, the largest rainforest in the world. Let's hope it stays that way. The Amazon rainforest will become very important as it is very secluded and so leads to secluded groups of people, which you've probably heard of before, with all of those uncontacted tribes in the Amazon. Another very important part of South American geography is the Andes mountain range. The Andes are the longest above-water mountain range and span most of South America's western edge. The mountain range will become important when we talk about ancient civilizations such as the Incas, and the mountain range is also still important today regarding countries like Chile. The Andes also partially create extremely arid deserts, such as the Atacama Desert. South America is also home to many different climates, from humid rainforests to arid deserts to freezing mountain peaks. This is of course just some basic South American geography, and I'll talk further about the geography as it comes up, but for now, this is all you should need to know. So without further ado, the history of South America. The earliest known settlements in South America are dated back possibly as far as 16,500 BCE. Yes, I'm going all the way back. An archaeological site known as Monte Verde in modern-day Chile is currently considered to be the earliest known human settlement in all of the Americas. So to give some more background, humans are thought to have gotten to the Americas by crossing the Bering Strait, as it once was a land bridge from when the sea levels were lower. Then, these people slowly moved all across North America and would eventually also get to South America, where they would continue migrating across the continent. And that's where this story starts. It's also thought that humans would migrate primarily via the coast as they entered new regions, and they would then move inland over time. The reason that people migrated coastally, if you're wondering, is because the coast provides better weather patterns and gives more food, such as fish. The site at Monte Verde points to this further, as I'm sure you can notice that it's just a few pixels away from the water. That's really close. So, I'm sure you're wondering, what was found at this Monte Verde location? Well, I'm glad you asked, because according to my script, I'm about to tell you. Oh, and Monteverde translates to the Green Mountain, if you're wondering. Anyways, back to the point at hand. Monteverde has 2 levels to it. The first level, which is the older one, has been dated from 16,500 BCE to 12,500 BCE. On this level, charcoal remains, charred animal bone fragments, and several lithic artifacts have been found. Side note, lithic artifacts are stone artifacts, which have presumably been shaped by a human to fulfill a certain purpose. The charcoal remains could potentially be signs of a campfire, and the bone fragments might show animals that were killed and eaten by humans. Guess vegans weren't exactly popular back then. The lithic artifacts also give fairly good evidence to support the claim that humans at one point stayed in that area. However, the second layer, which is the more recent one, is much more interesting. It's dated back from 12,800 BCE to 11,800 BCE, and has much more evidence that almost certainly proves that humans once lived there. At the site, there's a 20-foot-long, tent-like structure made out of wood and animal hides. It's thought that the site was the home for 20 to 30 people, and that was quite a lot back then. So anyways, at this point, you might be asking, why are you talking so much about this one Monteverde site? I just think it's interesting, and it paints a good picture as to what people were doing in South America, and all over the world, frankly, at this time, for thousands of years. Monteverde is the earliest one of these South American settlements we've found, but there were likely others, which date back to hundreds of years earlier than Monteverde. So obviously, people didn't move into South America starting from southern Chile, but that's the first place that we've found conclusive evidence of human life. So another important part of South America's earliest history is the domestication of animals and the discovery of agriculture by humans. All across the world, the domestication of animals and the discovery of agriculture was one of the things causing the rise of large civilizations and cities. When using agriculture as your primary food source, you end up having to stay in one place while waiting for your crops to grow. This causes people to settle down rather than living as hunter-gatherers who lived largely nomadic lifestyles. People settling down in one area leads to cities and towns, which then leads to entire civilizations. The first evidence we have supporting the existence of agricultural practices by the South American natives dates back to around 6,500 BCE, when potatoes, chilies, and beans started to be cultivated for food in the Amazon basin. Now, animals are a fairly important thing to talk about as well, because unlike Europe and Asia, there were very few domesticable animals available to the South American natives. Europeans have access to animals such as cows, sheep, pigs, dogs, cats, horses, and that's just naming a few. In comparison, there were only 3 major species which received widespread domestication across parts of South America. Those 3 species are llamas, alpacas, and guinea pigs. Llamas and alpacas were domesticated in the highlands of the Andes around 3,500 BCE. These animals were used for both transportation and sustenance. Their wool was also used to create clothing. Guinea pigs were also domesticated around the same time, all across South America, for food. You'll notice that in this list, there weren't any animals that could act as good companions to humans. In Europe, people could have dogs which were bred to become intensely loyal, and they would be used to herd flocks of animals such as sheep. But South America had no such comparison. I mean, I'm sure you could have a llama as a household pet, but I don't think it'd be recommended. And also, while llamas were used for transport, they weren't used for quick transport, and llamas weren't something that could easily be ridden on. Meanwhile, Europe had horses, which could be extremely quick, and once bred, could be ridden on with ease. I'll continue highlighting these advantages which Europe had going forwards with this series, because once Europeans do arrive in the New World and begin the subsequent conquest of said region, these disparities will be needed to highlight the reasons native South Americans were so disadvantaged, and how European empires were able to conquer essentially all of the continent. But those are some spoilers, and right now we have many other things to talk about before Europe will have to matter. By around 2000 BCE, which in comparison is 500 years after the pyramids of Giza were built, many agrarian villages had developed throughout the Andes and surrounding areas. Fishing quickly became a widespread practice across the coast, and fish became the primary food source for many of these villages. Systems of irrigation were developed around this time as well, and this aided the rise of these agrarian societies. Food crops consisted of multiple types of beans, sweet potatoes, quinoa, corn, squashes, peanuts, and oca. Side note, oca are a type of plant, which are fairly similar to potatoes, and are quite nutritious, like potatoes as well. Cotton was also a crop that was grown by South American natives. The regions around the Andes were the first areas to start agrarian societies, because they had easy access to the Pacific Ocean for fishing purposes, and they had very good soil for agricultural purposes. There were groups of people in the Amazonian area as well. However, they weren't as numerous, as it was extremely difficult to grow crops in the rainforest. so societies remained quite small, and it has led to those uncontacted tribes of people which you'll hear about from time to time in the Amazon rainforest. Around this time, some very early cultures were developing. Before agricultural developments in agrarian societies, large uniform cultures were rare, as people would be nomadic and thus wouldn't be in large groups of people where strong cultures could develop. However, now that people were staying in the same place year-round while they waited for their crops to grow, cultures started to appear, and different groups of people with them. I will discuss these new cultures and peoples in the next episode of this series. In this episode, we saw how people first arrived into our fourth largest continent, how they spread across the said continent, how they first started to shape their world to better help their survival, how people learned the secrets of agriculture and the domestication of animals, and how all of this would lead to the first unique cultures and peoples. The next video will focus on those earliest cultures and peoples and even some proper civilizations. Thank you for watching this first video in my series about South American history. I'm very excited to continue working on it and learn more about this fascinating continent's history with you all. If you enjoyed the video, then it would be appreciated if you liked it, and you can subscribe to this channel to continue being notified of my future videos in this South American series, and also any other history videos I create relating to topics from across the world. Once I release my next video in this series, there should be a link in the description which points you to that video. And you can also take a look at the playlist of my South American videos, which should be in my playlists section. Anyways, thank you for watching, and have a good day.